and deliver your money or your life. We're here at Avoncroft today and talking about Highwaymen, because who doesn't like Highwaymen? Well, the most infamous Highwayman throughout history, I'm sure we all can agree, is Dick Turpin. He gets everywhere. He gets his own comic book series, he gets his own 80s TV show, he gets his own carry-on film, and he even gets that most coveted of things, his own song on Horrible Histories. But probably the most interesting thing we find about Dick Turpin is that he's just not that interesting at all. He's cast as a dashing hero of romance, the sort that would set a Mills and Boon novel alight, but his description in the London Gazette actually reads, Richard Turpin, a tall, fresh-coloured man, very much marked with the smallpox. Not quite the smouldering sex symbol. And this is not the only fiction that follows him through history. So, initially he was a butcher by trade, and his early life of crime started out in the truly dull area of receiving stolen goods, namely the deer stolen by a local gang of poachers. However, when this started to decline and that particular gang was broken apart, the remnants of the gang turned to burglary, particularly violent burglary. Raiding the house of one farmer, a Joseph Lawrence, they broke into the house and then they started to drag the 70-year-old farmer around by his nose. They tied up both of his maids, pulled his trousers down and sat his bare bottom in the fire. They emptied a kettle of boiling water over his head and beat him around the head with their pistols in an attempt to find out where he kept his valuables, which of course he didn't tell them. They continued to drag him around the house by his nose, and then finally, to round this off, took one of his maids upstairs and raped her. And all of that for a haul of £30. Not exactly robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, is he? Following a series of similar raids with similar levels of brutality, this caused the Duke of Newcastle to put a £50 bounty on information leading to the conviction of the Gregory gang. And with that much money on the table, the game was soon up. The gang was broken up, arrested, Turpin fled, and it's at that point that he turned to the career he's become most famous for. But even his time as a highwayman is fairly nondescript. He's got a pretty much just 6-month-long active career, and it is a 6-month catalogue of beatings, rapes, tortures, as his history suggests, and at least one murder. And that murder was Thomas Morris, a servant of one of the keepers of Epping Forest. And it is that action that changed Turpin's life much for the worse, because in response to this, that put a £200 bounty on him, and for that he had to flee and hide. He was arrested and bound over in Beverley House of Correction under a false name. Hiding his real identity, he tried to write to his brother-in-law for assistance, but this was declined. And to make matters worse, the clerk at the post office recognised the handwriting on the envelope as belonging to Turpin, and the game was up. He was hanged for horse theft on the 7th of April 1739 at Knavesmire near York. The Gentleman's Magazine of the time described his brashness of the gallows. Turpin behaved in an undaunted manner as he mounted the ladder. Feeling his right leg tremble, he spoke a few words to the topsman, then threw himself off and expired in 5 minutes. The body is said to lie in St George's Churchyard, Fishergate in York, where people still leave money today. I ask you, hasn't he taken enough? So, if there is a highwayman that's actually worthy of the reputation that Dick Turpin has, then it's going to be this guy, John Swift Nick Nevison. Now, he was a Yorkshireman like myself. He was tall, he was dashing, he was good looking, he was everything that a highwayman is supposed to be. Now, that can be quite a hard thing for us to prove, because all the way throughout highwayman history, the primary sources usually have been embellished or fictionalised to create a narrative. And John Nevison is no different. But what does strike him out as makes him noticeable is that he gets quite a positive review in the Newgate Calendar. And the Newgate Calendar, a best-selling but distinctly anti-crime periodical, still gives him a good write-up, then there's got to be something special about him. So the Newgate calendar states, all his pranks he was very favourable to the female sex, who generally gave him the character of a civil, obliging robber. He was charitable also to the poor, relieving them out of the spoils with which he took from them that could better spare it. And being a true royalist, he never attempted anything against that par. Very Robin Hood, don't you think? So, remember that 200-mile ride that Dick Turpin is famous for all the way to York on Black Bess? Well, that, John Nevison. Having committed a robbery in Gad's Hill in Kent at 4 o'clock in the morning, he was instantly recognised, and he needed an alibi, and he got one, by getting on his horse and riding flat out to York, pausing only for short periods of time to rest his horse. Whereupon, on arriving at York, he got himself lodgings, changed clothing, and then went and met with the Lord Mayor of York for a game of bowls, even taking the time to put a bet on the game and therefore having the time of his visit recorded. And when he was inevitably arrested for the Gad's Hill robbery, he had, in the form of the mayor, a witness of unimpeachable character who could testify that he was in York that evening and couldn't possibly have made that ride in that time. Well, we've done a little bit of the maths, and that is a 225-mile journey up the Great North Road, which is done in about 16 hours. Works out to an average speed of around 14 miles per hour. Now, I'm not a horse person, I'm really not, so any of you that are watching, if you are, does that sound like a doable journey? Let us know in the comments, we'd be interested to hear your thoughts. He was a notorious escaper, having broken out of Wakefield jail, having jumped ship when he was transported to Tangiers. He even once posed as a victim of the plague where no one dared go anywhere near the body and were happy to certify him as dead from a distance. But on the 6th of March 1684, the game was up when he was arrested for the murder of Constable Darcy Fletcher. He was sentenced that he must die, for he was a terror to the country. He was hanged at Knavesmire in York on the 4th of May 1684. The gentleman highwayman was no more. Except that he wasn't the gentleman highwayman at all. That honour goes to Captain James Macleane, whose exploits are beautifully exaggerated and fictionalised in the 1999 movie Plunkett and Macleane. But they are real people who committed real robberies, even if they never got to cop off with Liv Tyler. The son of an Irish clergyman, Macleane had soon frittered away his inheritance on wine, loose women and fine clothing. And it wasn't long before he couldn't afford the lifestyle he wished to be accustomed to. However, at this point, he hooks up with bankrupt apothecary William Plunkett, and between them they commit around 20 robberies of the great and the good in Hyde Park. Known effectively for being very polite, never using bad language, only using violence when absolutely necessary, it didn't take long for Macleane, or at least Macleane's alter ego, to become known as the gentleman highwayman. He is most known for having robbed politician Horace Walpole, and after Walpole posted a reward of 20 guineas for the return of his valuables, Macleane wrote him a very polite and flowery letter requesting a higher fee. We have likewise seen the advertisement offering a reward of 20 guineas for your watch and seals, which are very safe, and you shall have with your sword and the coachman's watch for 40 guineas and not a shilling less. Macleane was arrested after a pawnbroker grassed him up. He had recognised the lace that had come into his shop as having been sold earlier that morning. He informed the authorities, Macleane's lodgings were searched, and sure enough, they found pretty much all of Walpole's stolen possessions. He was incarcerated to await his day in court and subsequently sentenced to death. Unlike the dramatic scenes of rescue shown in the movie, Will Plunkett just left Macleane to his fate, kept the money and fled to America. During his incarceration, Macleane was said to receive over 3,000 visitors coming to visit him in his cell in Newgate Jail, the jailer actually selling tickets just for the visiting rights. He was hanged at Tyburn on the 3rd of October 1750. A suitably just end for, let's be fair, a robber. Still, he was fabulous and it was a bloody good laugh. Bye bye.